Well, welcome. What's everybody doing, man? All good? All right, what we got?
Just going into your third season, I want to say.
That's right.
At Ole Miss, just what's different about this defense? What excites you about it?
Yeah, obviously the big difference is when you come in year one, everybody's new, right? Regardless whether they were here previously, transfer, high school guys, and obviously you're trying to build a culture on that side of the ball, right? You're putting a different language in, obviously from a football standpoint on that side of the ball. So that first year is kind of a struggle. Obviously you can't do a lot of your package because you got to keep it pretty simple, right? Because you don't have older guys helping you coach. And so year two, obviously coming in, we brought in a lot of new players, right? Had some guys that played the previous year, but now you're looking at guys that have been in the system for 2 years. And so a lot of these mid-semester transfer guys, when they came in, they're sitting beside a guy that already knows what to do. And that's really big to help bring them under their wing, right, and help coach and develop those guys as well. So and the other piece of that to me is of the spot the ball mentality that we have on defense can't come from the coach. That's got to come from the players. It's got to be a player-led team. So having a room full of guys, regardless whether they started the game or they played 20 snaps, right, having been through and understanding what the expectation is on that side of the football here, right, to be able to get that through to the new guys, right, whether being a freshman or a portal guy has been huge as well. But it's a really exciting group to me. I think it's a really good combination of young returners and transfer players. I think they're doing a great job of gelling right now. Obviously there's no depth charts for us right now, but we got some competing that are really taking the right steps. But I think it's a really good mesh of guys that we can get 25 to 28 guys. That's normally the number we're looking for to play winning football. And whatever role that is, depending upon what game we play. So we got a lot of battles right now. We just finished practice 11. Obviously, from a front standpoint, I don't think we're going to take a step back from last year. It's going to be some different names. But obviously the big thing on those guys, they've been in the system. And I think we're going to have some guys that y'all know their name already, having big-time recruits. They're going to have big years for us, and I think they've been practicing really well. Go ahead.
To that point, what's kind of the biggest challenges or obstacles you got to overcome with this defense, knowing what you lost from last year?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're at in college football, to be honest with you. Obviously we had 8 guys move on to fulfill their dreams, 5 of those guys being drafted. But you hope you're getting to a program where that's year in and year out, right? Obviously the difference now is you can bring in some older veteran guys that have had experience, right, that now you just got to learn to the system. So the benefit of it right now is we've got all the young guys that I think are going to make the biggest jump this year have been in the system and played last year. Now, it might not have been when the game was on the line, right, and it might not have been the whole package, right? They just came in on base downs or they just came in on third down. It was very situational. But it's really nice to have the guys that have already been in the scheme, the Cam Franklins of the world, right, the Will Eccles of the world, right, all those guys that have been here, right, know the expectation, know what to do, and then seeing, right, them grow in the weight room from a strength and conditioning standpoint. And so I think we're going to be really excited with the guys that have already been here. And then obviously we lost some value all coming off the edge, right, from an elite pass rusher. And so going in and getting those 2 guys, right, whether it's being Prince Will, right, or from LSU, to where really be able to affect the passer like we did last year. I think those guys can really have elite ability to affect the passer on base downs and third down. And I think they give you some flexibility to move them around. So I think that was the big need. We didn't take one interior defensive lineman out of the portal because we felt like we did a good job in the last 2 classes of recruiting interior D linemen that had already been in the system that could play winning football, right? It was just those edges kind of between Womack, right, and Prince Will, right, from the transfer standpoint to give us some more depth at that, be able to move them around. So excited about the front.
Pete, you signed an extension today. How'd that kind of come together, and what does it mean to you to get that done?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we came here from a family decision standpoint, so that's one thing when you make the decision, right, you never know what they think about you. So obviously from the chancellor, right, to Keith, to Coach Kiffin, obviously we appreciate that. This is where we want to be. This is why we came here. So I think that's a direct reflection of the players, of the coaching staff. That has nothing to do with me. But obviously when you come here and want to be here, right, the commitment on both sides is awesome to see. So, yeah, definitely grateful and appreciative of that.
Jaylen Braxton got out there a little bit today. He's been banged up since he got here. Just got him a safety. He was a freshman All-American at Arkansas as a cornerback. Just kind of what led to that, and what kind of a player could he potentially be for y'all?
Yeah, so we played him at both spots since he's been here. Obviously he came in, rehabbing an injury. So we started him at free safety in the spring, right, to learn that position because it's a harder spot because he's never played it. And then in the summer he worked at nothing but corner, right? So he's got the versatility to be able to play all 5. And so that's really going to be at a spot based on who we have healthy. But he'll be very versatile. He'll be the move part. There's going to be some games if he's healthy, he's going to be at corner. There's going to be some games if he's healthy, he's at free. He's got an elite skill set. He's got a really high football IQ. So he's just getting back now to where he's healthy. And so it's good to get him out there for a couple snaps because, the only thing we haven't seen him do it live here yet. Obviously, we love what we saw on tape, right, previous to the injury, but we love what he's wired with, right? I think he's really a high football IQ guy, so it gives us a lot of versatility with some length and some speed. So he'll definitely be a move piece for us.
Pete, what's the next step for Sontaran Perkins?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love his energy, his attitude, his body language. I think his stature sometimes, right? He's a will backer by stature, right? And that was the one thing from the recruitment standpoint of it's like, hey, we're going to get you on the field where we can get you on the field the fastest, right? That might not be, right, exactly what you're playing at the next level. And then we'll have some packages, right, once we get you to that point and you're comfortable at your primary position, right, to be able to move you more around for you than really for us, to be honest with you. All right, so there's going to be some flexibility to moving them around in certain packages, right? We got some 4-3 packages and things like that, right, to move them around and put them in space. But what we do with the Jack, he's going to have film of him being a will backer. He's apex, he stacks, right? He comes from multiple different spots. So his versatility on tape to get him drafted to his highest point, right, is still going to be there regardless where we put him at. But he's an elite player where he is, and he's much more heavier-handed than people think he is, right, based on his size. So there's definitely not a hey, we're moving him and from what you've seen and what you're used to, but obviously we've got the flexibility now to move him more than we ever have just because of his understanding of the base primary position, and he's got an elite skill set to be able to do that. So he'll be in multiple spots as well.
Pete, you guys obviously have had a lot of success in the portal on your side of the ball. I know you're obviously looking for good players, but is there something else, another characteristic that you're hunting for in the portal that you kind of feel like you found that's enabled guys to come in and sort of ingratiate themselves into the program the way they have?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the biggest thing, when most guys aren't playing where they're at, there's a reason. Right, and I think that a lot of times happens in the portal. They were this 5-star recruit, all right, or they were this highly recruited player that didn't pan out. They never played. There's a reason he didn't play, all right, whether he's not athletic enough, whether he's not fast enough, or doesn't have a high enough football IQ, right, to be able to understand the defense. So we don't take guys in the portal that weren't starters from where they're at, number one, right, because obviously if you're not good enough to play for them, you're probably not good enough to play for us regardless of what team you're on. And I think what that comes with is with experience. All right, so obviously they have game experience. They've been in big games. Y'all remember in this meeting last year, the focus was SEC transfers because I felt like when we got to Georgia, the moment was too big. Right, we had took starters. Right, Dejon Anthony was a starter, but he's coming from Liberty. Right, John Saunders was a starter, but he's coming from Miami, Ohio. Nothing against those schools. Right, but that moment, here's a top 10 matchup. Right, Georgia at night. I just felt like that game got to us kind of emotionally, and we didn't play our best. And so that year, obviously, was looking at, hey, SEC first, right, more based on, hey, they've been in that stadium. They're not going to take a picture when they get there, right? They've been in big moments, right? They've been in bowl games, right? They've been in all those things. So that's just the next game when you get there. So obviously, we like to do that first. I think this is the best league in college football. So if they're starting in this league and we can get them, great, right? And then obviously, number one for us, I think the tape evaluation is easy. I think anybody, right? Y'all can watch the tape and, damn, he's a good player. Right, but number one, from a football intelligence standpoint, right, he was in English. He's coming here. It's about to be French. Right, does he have the ability, right, to process it, right, to get on the field and show you the same things that he was doing? Number two is what systems he's in. A lot of systems, right, like go and base around certain characteristics that make good players. Right, and sometimes you move them to a spot, right, and they're not a good player anymore, right, because it's not the same system. So I think we're specifically looking for certain traits, right, obviously when we watch tape, right, but I think that's for high school players. Right, guys that are DB that can run, right, can play the ball in the deep part of the field, can tackle, right. I think when you go from the transfer standpoint, they better be a system fit, number one, on tape, right. Number two, right, they need to be the guy where they're at. But number three, we do a great job in the evaluation process. Is this somebody our players want to be around, right? We put a lot on our players when we bring a guy in on an OV, right, and they're hanging out with them. We get their feedback before we're ever going to take a guy. All right, because they've actually hung out with them right outside of this building, saw some true colors, and say, hey, is this going to be a good teammate and somebody you want to go to war with or not? And so we get a lot of feedback from those guys. But the big part for us is, to me, is football IQ. Everybody can watch the tape, right? And I think a lot of times in recruiting right now, there's some people that love football, and there's some people that love what football can do for them, right? And the paycheck looks good, and the car's good, and the condo's better, right? And I'm going to the country club with the coaches and doing all those things. But at the end of the day, when it gets hard, they don't love football. Right, and they start running from it. So I think that's our biggest thing in the evaluation process. It's not the tape, right? It's really who they are, right? Do they love football, and do they have a high football IQ, or are they going to be a good teammate?
Feels like, all eyes are kind of on the secondary and with a lot of new faces, young guys getting opportunities. At this point in camp, where are you from your perspective, and what do you need to see out of them these next couple weeks for the opener?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're counting on 9 guys in a secondary weren't here in the spring, that should be the question, right? So, we didn't have a lot of those guys, whether they're here, they weren't healthy, but the way the rules are in the summer now, right, with those 2 hours a week and all those type of things, the summer's really big for us, right, of obviously introducing the scheme, right, and from a technical standpoint, and them getting able to get some reps as well. But, obviously in this defense, you got to be solid outside in, right, so the corner position. I thought we brought in several guys that are playing at a really high level right now. I think Antonio Kite is who we thought he was when we signed him at Bama originally, right? He's really came in, a really athletic kid. Was committed to Alabama as a point guard first, all right? Really good transitional movements, could play the ball in the deep part of the field. And then this league, you play versus big people, so that was the whole thing of taking Ricky Fletcher out of South Alabama, who's a Mississippi kid that's 6'3.5", he's 200 pounds, right? And he's a size speed guy. That isolation in the boundary is not always an issue. And so Ricky had a really good summer. He's had a good fall camp. So excited to get him back. He was back out there today healthy as well. A guy that started at the position, obviously didn't play last year, right, due to an injury, but a guy that's had experience, has got size, speed, right, and is not scared, of contact. And then you got Graves, obviously, that's been here a couple years, right, from an ability standpoint. It's never been the issue, right, it's the consistency doing it, snap in and snap out. Has a great understanding of the defense, right, has all the tools, right, in that fight. Really excited about Dante Core, all right, a true freshman. I think he's got an elite skill set and just a different mentality. You saw him out there today. He's going against a senior, right? Really good double move, touchdown on him, but he's got amnesia, and it's hard for 18-year-old kids to actually do that. And he goes and spots the ball, and it doesn't affect the next step. But I think he's going to be a really good player in the future. And then we got to get some guys healthy. Said Beavers had a really good spring, right? Was having a really good summer, got banged up. He came back today as well, so it's really good to get back there. He's the fastest kid on our team, all right? So a smaller field corner, right, that has the ability to play man-to-man. But we've got several guys in that room right now that are competing their butt off. And I will feel really good about 4 of them by the end of it, that we think we could play winning football with in the SEC and not miss a beat.
Last year's defensive front was obviously so good. You mentioned the hope expectation this year is to keep that level of play up. If that happens, what does that unlock for the rest of the defense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, anywhere from a defensive standpoint, you got to stop the run in order to have fun. You know what I'm saying? So, I think the benefit of having good players up front, and then obviously what you do up front to cancel gaps and to help guys to change the math, but you don't have to put everybody in the box to do it. Obviously that's the problem in this league. You can design something to stop it based on numbers, but then now you got a one-on-one matchup you don't like. So I think it's really important in this league. When we first got here, we felt like we got to fix the front. Right, and I don't care what type of coach you are. If you don't have good players, you're not a good coach. All right, so obviously from the recruiting standpoint, that was so big when I first got here. It was like, hey, 5-hour radius, right? D lineman that we want, we need to get, right? But you got to change, right, what it looks like, right? So we're showing Bama tape when you first get here. You got to put the product on film, right? Does it make sense? So I think that was the exciting thing of what the legacy of that last group created for them. What is like, hey, we're going to do it at Ole Miss because they just did it. They just led the SEC, right? I can stay in my state, right, compete in the best conference in college football and still lead the SEC in defense. So obviously those guys did a tremendous job last year, but that was last year. And that was the thing, when we had our first spring meeting, the legacy of that team's over, right, and that defense is over. This defense hasn't done anything yet. The standard's the same, right? Does that make sense? But we got to come to work every day. I think we got enough talent in the room. But we had some tough guys in that room that had a high football IQ and loved to compete and play football. And I think we got the same type of guys right now. Not the same names. It's not going to be jersey number 2. It's not going to be Walter Nolan, right? But I think you're going to see some different names, some different numbers, and see a lot of the same results because they understand what we do, they understand the expectation, and obviously they're good enough to do it.
When you go back to the transfer portal and you're recruiting some of these players that you're familiar with from the high school days or your previous stop or any of that, how much does that factor into the evaluation, point of it, and then how much going forward does that continue to kind of reinforce why you keep recruiting and, going through all of that, even, after guys maybe commit elsewhere, you just keep the relationships up?
Yeah, I think it's huge. So number one, I think on the very front end, right, I think it's very business generated. Every recruit's going to tell you, hey, the relationship's the most important thing. And you're going to give them 1,000 examples of the guy that recruited them is not even there when they signed, right? Or they got there, right? Does it make sense? Like, yeah, relationships are important, right? And people make places, but you got to make sure where's the stability within the relationship, right? Number one. And then number 2 is the guy that you got a great relationship actually control any decision, right? Like, I'm a DB, the DB coach recruiting you. The DB coach ain't deciding who to play in a DB, right? He ain't deciding that. right? So you could be his guy, but it ain't going to matter. Right, does it make sense? I mean, if you're at Alabama, that's going to be Nick Saban. Right? If you're going to be here, that's Lane Kiffin. Right? And it's going to be to the coordinator. All right? So a lot of those times, that relationship piece sometimes, like, hey, they don't control, right, and affect what you really want. You want the ability to compete early as a what? As a freshman. Then the other part of the relationship is really, really important out of high school. But if it ain't equal, it ain't going to what? It ain't going to matter. Right? There's the business side of it, right? You might like this new boss you're interviewing with. He's offering you half the money. You ain't going. I don't care how much you like drinking beer with him. It ain't going to matter, right? Does that make sense? So I think, obviously, when things start getting even out of high school, right, then obviously relationships really matter. And there's stability within the relationship, which I think is the best thing that we have going for us, right? No different than I said last year, right? I mean, the top defensive players over the last 10 years have been taken from Bama and Georgia because of the consistency of the schemes, right? And that's it. Right? You recruit good players, you don't change the system, right? And then now they go to the next level. So with Coach Kiff being here and his family here and Knox moving here, right? We moved here for our family, right? We got a new contract and all that. There's stability in the head coach and your defensive system. And so when you get really good players in that and know that system's not going to change, now your junior year, your most important year because you're draft eligible, it's the third year in the same system. So a lot of the ones that we don't get out of high school that we develop really good relationships, we're telling them all these things. And we say, hey, you can go chase this, and I know it sounds good right now, and it's really hard. It's 18 years old. But this is what's going to happen. This is no different with Trey Amos, right, when he was leaving ULL to go to Alabama. Right? I told him exactly, this is what's going to happen. They're not moving Kool-Aid. They're not moving Terrion. Now, I know they're telling you that. It's not going to happen. So then a year later, they didn't. So now he's calling, dude, coach, you were right. All right, so you build some trust there, and obviously you're trying to recruit them the right way. But obviously the system didn't change, right? You were recruiting them. They were interested because they liked your system, the head coach, right, the town, the school. So that second time is always easier, in my opinion, right, when you've built it the right way. And no different than I tell a recruit right now, man. I was like, look, there could come to a point where you're not going to come to Ole Miss. Hey, just call me, coach. Love you, appreciate you. No telling what the future holds, right? But I'm going to go in a different direction. Because you have no idea, that guy that you're talking to, where he's going to be or if you're going to end up back there. And that's the same thing from recruiting. I'm not getting pissed off, right, when a guy picks Oklahoma right over us, right? I'm upset. We got to do a better job of recruiting it. We didn't do a good enough job selling it, right? But it's not like I'm telling the kid, go to hell, right? Hey, best of luck to you, right? Hey, we're here. You know where to find us, right? Because obviously that day comes for everybody. Does that make sense?
Speaking on stability, just talk about how coming into this fall camp you wanted to kind of evaluate your linebacking core with, TJ and Tyler Banks and even Todd Chambers out there. What did you kind of want to see with them coming into fall camp? And so far throughout these couple practices, how would you evaluate just in terms of their leadership and vocally and physically what they've been doing so far through fall camp?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we put a lot on those guys, obviously, to get the front lined up. A lot of kills and a lot of checks to do a lot with the front. So, those guys in this system need to have a high football IQ, right, which we recruited all of them because of that. And number two, they need to be erasers. I think that was Paul's best quality, right, is the ability to track the ball carrier, right, and had great contact balance and finish, right. He had the lowest missed tackle rate, I think, in college football last year, right. So when you're doing a lot up front, right, you need some guys behind it that are instinctive that can make things right, but they got to be able to get the guy on the ground. And I think that's the biggest thing when you bring up Taj and you bring up Yates, right, and you bring up Andrew Jones. All three of those guys were all conference players where they were at. All three of those guys were team captains where they were at, right? So it goes back to the football intelligence standpoint. The film showed us that, right? But loving football, right, having a high football IQ. And they're all three very different, right? And that was the one thing. We're not trying to create the same player through one person, right? Because you got to have a lot of depth in this league to make it through this schedule. And so I think that's the best thing about all three of those guys. What they're elite at, they're all different. And so there's going to be a lot of rotations and different packages to get those guys involved. But I think they've had a really good camp. I think of them, if you're asking me right now, I think Taj Chambers is performing at an extremely high level. He's a size, speed guy that we're really, really excited about. I think Jaden Yates has played a lot of football, probably one of the smarter ones in the room, very instinctive. And Andrew Jones flashes like, hey, that's what it is, right? It's just the consistency of doing that snap in and snap out. And we've got to get him the way he makes more plays for us than he does against us. And we're still working through that, and he's working hard at it. But I think that room is led by T.J. Dottery, like you said. And it's a guy that's been here for 2 years, right, that had to come in his first year and watch, right, because he had to sit out. And then becomes eligible for the bowl game and plays a completely different position, right? He comes in for Said at Jack, right? That's just who he is. Spot the ball, line me up, coach, right? And then to have him at the middle of the defense in the green dot, right, getting everybody lined up, right, there's a sense of calmness for that room. And so when those guys have questions, they don't always have to come to Coach Shoup, Coach Kiff, or me, right? They're going to TJ. Hey, TJ, what am I supposed to do here, right? And he's got a really good demeanor about himself. But I think all three of those guys have leadership ability to answer your question because they've been captains where they were at. Now, I think they did a great job coming in by example first, right? And 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? And kind of got a feel of the place, right? And now they're in a position by their play to be able to bring some people with them. But we're really excited about the linebacker group.
Do you see Cam Franklin playing a Jared Ivey role inside and out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cam probably, from a defensive standpoint, has had the biggest improvement from day one until where he is now. Right, obviously, from a film evaluation standpoint in high school, you knew he had the tools and all that, right? It was just getting the pad level down, getting him stronger, right? But I think he's really heavy-handed. I think he's got more twitch than people think, right? And his length becomes a problem. So to answer your question, absolutely. He'll be at the 9, he'll be at the 5, he'll be at the 4, he'll be at the 3, and he'll be at the 2-eye. And so he'll have the flexibility, right? Because we're left and right in a lot of packages based on tempo. So he'll have the ability to play all of those. They're all the same stimulus response, and he's got enough length, and obviously he's really heavy-handed, and he's a good pass rusher. So he's playing himself into an every-down player, right, which is really exciting. And that's what was, interesting about J.I., right? He was first down, second down, and third down, and was actually a move guy on third down because his ability to affect the quarterback. So we're really excited about Cam, but I would put him in that category as what we're going to try to do with him 100%.
What are some of the differences between Prince Will and Prince Lee?
Oh, man, something I can say out here? No, I think, obviously our questions with Prince Lee, and he would tell you the same thing. I thought he had to improve on base downs at the point of attack, right, coming from Florida to here. The struggle with that was, right, when he got here, because he was mid-semester, he had shoulder surgery. So we didn't get him for all that spring or that summer to really work on, right, at the point of attack, striking blocks, right, not being a flesh magnet. And so it took to about game 3 or game 4. I think the difference in him right now is at the point of attack, right? Now, obviously, his brother's not hurt, right? So that's a little, unfortunate for Princely. But Prince Will's very heavy-handed. He kind of reminds me, and don't take this the wrong way, and I'm not saying putting this out there, but, he's kind of a combination of Will and Dallas, right? Will was so heavy-handed, right? But Dallas was the guy you wanted to give a two-way go because of the twitch and flipping the hips and having elite pass rush ability. And so there's flashes of those. But, he can line up as a 6 technique on a tight end. You can put him as a 5 technique on a tackle, and he can put his body, my body, somebody in the B gap. Right? And then you're going to try to move him on third down to create the matchup you want because he could be a problem based on who's blocking him. So I think right now he's more of a every down player at this time, right, than when his brother came in at that time. A lot of that was due based to the injury, but I do think he's a little heavier-handed at the point of attack. Sorry, Princely. Good? All right.